Hello everyone, we're back again with another video around self-organization, and after basics and mindset and operations and governance, this video is all about structure, really, how to scale your organizations with the principles of self-organization, and also, what else? Because there's not only work. So we're going to explore that a little bit also today and deepen the stuff that we talked about in the basics about a symbiotic enterprise, basically. The purpose of Gaianet, why we are here today and why our organization exists, is to unite all of the contributors to the new Earth in a regenerative network, and thereby facilitating the implementation of a community-type civilization. Our role today is to be a self-organization guide for you and really for all of humanity. And our purpose is to facilitate the construction of the new Earth through active co-creation support. And for those who want to really geek out on all this terminology and the community-type civilization, we refer you to the Oravana literature, and there you can find a description of the new Earth's purpose. It's just a definition, but for us it seems to be the most concise one. And Gaianet's next to all the beautiful buzzwords of, we're co-creating a new Earth that works for everyone, but that's actually what we're really doing. We're exploring and embodying what is co-creation. We're exploring and embodying what is the new Earth and how can you make that work for everyone.
Yeah, a little disclaimer. This is not an official Holacracy class. We're not certified trainers. And we cannot use this. It means that you as a listener or as a receiver of this video cannot use it in any commercial way either. We are not licensed Holacracy coaches. As I said, I did do the practitioner and I have ambitions to do the coaching as well. So maybe by the time you see this, that happens. But for now, definitely not the case. We're going to talk a lot about the organizational structure within Holacracy in this presentation. And what I really enjoy personally about Holacracy is how much it fits with organic reality. It's really, the organizational structure in Holacracy is really the same as how nature solves for complexity. Because what we see is all organizations really start with a purpose, right? There's a reason for being. There's something we're all working towards, let's say. So if we stick to like the organic example here, you could have all these different organs and cells that work together to fulfill the purpose of creating this organism that can survive and get new generations going. And all these organs and cells are part of this whole, but they're also systems in and of itself, and there's self-organization there, and there's a certain authority within these organs and cells. There's no CEO cell telling every other cell what to do. There's this organic movement in there, and that's also what Holacracy is based on. Holacracy comes from the word holan, which means a part that is both a part and a whole. So, for example, you cannot see an organ as separate from the organism, right? So it's an organ is both a part and a whole. Same goes for atoms and molecules, for example, that together form cells, etc. And what you see is this kind of has this fractal structure in it as well, where all these holes on small levels are also a hole in a bigger level that are also a hole on a bigger level. And we see the same thing in Holacracy with the circles and the roles.
And what I love so much about this, you were giving the example of the human body with different cells and organs. And if the liver needs something, then it communicates to the whole body and all the cells respond in a way. And if you look, nature is organized the same way. Is also there this distributed authority. It's all autonomous, right? Yet it's all interconnected. And it's so beautiful that this way to coordinate work comes from that philosophy.
Exactly. Yeah. So how that actually looks is kind of like this. So it starts with a big purpose. Then out of that purpose, we see all these kind of different circles emerge that also have that are carrying a smaller piece of that specific purpose. Now, it could be that certain sub-circles emerge out of that are together focusing on one of the sub-purposes. And within that, you have all these different roles that are also carrying a sub-part of the bigger purpose. And this is kind of echoes through really in an infinite way, depending on how deep you want to get organized. So, and what is really fun, I think in our presentation, we already used the example of a forest, right? Where, well, depending on the country you're in, but a forest usually doesn't have a designer. You know, in the Netherlands, unfortunately, that's not too often the case anymore. But I really enjoy this picture because what you see here is the difference between what design is, you know, what happens when you let top down a designer think of how people should walk, and then the user experience side. So what are people actually experiencing, or what are they actually doing with the design that you laid out? And this is something we very often see, right? Where the design doesn't match how people are actually using it. And this happens all the time if you try to predict the future and, you know, have these top-down designs on how something should work. It usually doesn't work. It's much better to let that emerge out of the people who are actually using your product or actually doing the work or whatever. And this is in Holacracy, we also do this. We don't just do this with the products that we deliver or the services, but we do this with the organizational structure itself. So the organizational structure itself is constantly adapting based on where people are walking and where they are creating paths. We just go after that and we lay the bricks so that it becomes even easier for the next role person to go through that path.
I've noticed this is a particular thing. I've read a lot and I've heard this explained a lot when we started with Holacracy. And the only way to really get this is through deep practice and really making miles. So if you're listening to this and it doesn't really make sense to you, then that's really normal. And a lot of these things probably don't make sense because we're so programmed and conditioned to predict and control the future through, well, many of our systems, right? So the main conclusion is this is best felt in the direct experience of practicing this, what it's like to be in an ever-evolving environment that you contribute to its design and structure all the time.
Yeah. So to dive a little bit into the details and the specifics, as you've heard in the other presentations as well, we work with what we call circles. And a circle is a group of roles that all contribute to the same purpose. A circle has the same elements of a role, like a purpose, domains, and accountabilities, and is treated like a role with the additional authority to break itself down into smaller roles. So this is also where that fractal structure comes in, because a circle really is practically the same as a role. So in a super circle, and we'll show that in a later example as well, it could be that the subcircle is that subcircle is also considered a role in the super circle, and a super circle is a circle outside. So, for example, you might have a marketing circle, and there's a specific group of roles working on Twitter, on the Twitter account, and there's a circle there. Now, in that marketing circle, we would still the Twitter circle would basically be a role in the marketing circle, if that makes sense. Am I explaining myself well, Daan? I feel like I'm...
For me, it's very clear. I don't know if it's clear for the listener, but what he's basically trying to say that you can split up a lot of work of one role into a sub-circle. So that will become a nested circle. But the way that role that has then become a circle is treated in its super circle, it's still treated as a role. So it's still all the roles grouped together with one purpose, domain, and a set of accountabilities as it's functioning in the higher up circle. And that's that smaller becoming bigger kind of concept. But it's still seen at the higher level as the unity and not as all those roles together. That's what you're explaining here, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we'll go into it a little deeper later as well. Oh, this already shows it a little bit. That's great. So here you can actually see what happens there. So for example, this bigger blue one might be the marketing circle, for example. And then this smaller blue one might be the Twitter circle with within it different roles. Now, if there are meetings of the marketing circle, then there would be one or two representatives of this circle that are there as the role of Twitter circle. So they kind of represent all these different roles that might be contained within the circle. And just to talk about terminology a little bit, to explain, super circle is always the circle outside of the circle that you are currently talking about. And sub-circle is the one within it. So it's a relative perspective, right? So it's the circle outside of the circle you're talking about or inside.
So then which roles are there and how is this authority really distributed? This is where it's going to get really juicy, and we'll elaborate on this circle lead role first, which is the role that holds the purpose of the circle. It holds also all accountabilities of the circle that have not been delegated to other roles or role leads. And what does that exactly mean is that if you start up a new circle, for example, and that's really tension driven, and for example, this Twitter circle, and you know that somebody needs to make content, somebody needs to respond, and you do not have people to energize those things yet, then the circle lead takes on all these accountabilities. And that is the case in every circle. And that can also happen that you hold a role and you feel like you don't feel to energize that role anymore. I had that this last weekend within Gaianet, and I called the circle lead and I said, look, purely tension driven, I need to realign my focus. I don't feel that I want to take care of the community platform anymore. So I'm just going to drop the role. And the circle lead automatically takes on all of the accountabilities that I just dropped, because the circle lead is responsible for assigning people to roles that have been created through the governance process. So this is all like tension driven, and acting as this role lead for unfulfilled roles. So there is a mechanism behind that, why that is on the circle lead, because you can imagine if people drop their roles around you and you get all this workload, then you will prioritize finding other people to energize these roles. So that's also creating a tension for the circle lead to find new people. So it's responsible for attracting the right people in the right place. Okay, and we'll go into the next slide on a little bit more detail about that. But to finish this one off, what is also an important job for the circle lead is to define priorities and strategies for the circle. And now we'll show in the next slide, you know, how that all works and why it's not called a manager.
Yeah, maybe I want to zoom in a little bit more on priorities and strategies, since they have quite a specific meaning in Holacracy, and it's not per se what we're used to. So as you see here, like this is quite, this is a role that does hold some power, right? And Daan will go into the difference between this and a manager in the next slide.
Correct you, it's authority. Nobody holds power over nobody. There's no power here. So we keep mixing this up, eh?
Yeah.
The authority does not equal power. There's no power play. So, but keep going.
And this is a perfect example of what still happens. Like 80% of our meetings, and you know, and like there's like so many of these kind of nuanced things that you have to be on the lookout for. But so thank you. And to dive into priorities and strategies, because within Holacracy it's very important that there is no role that can coerce anyone to do anything. You know, so you cannot tell a person to do any work. They're always free to choose what their priorities are and what, like, how they should act within their role. Yet there might come a time where you are not sure as a role where your priorities are, or you know, there's a lot of work for your circle, and there needs to be some priorities being set. You know, what are we going to spend our time on now? And then the circle lead can come in and can actually set these priorities to help roles out. And the same goes for strategies. So again, there might be a strategy which strategies work quite specifically in on Holacracy, where it is kind of a specific sentence that would say, we focus on high quality even over getting paid well, for example. So you would have to take two things that you really value, and you would take this one is more important than this one. And this only really comes up if then a role has to decide between those two things. So a role is working on a project and thinks, I can do this and it's done very quickly, we make more money, or I go for quality. Hey, we have that strategy, so now I know where my priorities are. So this is different than someone who plans the next 6 months of what people should be doing or whatever. That's not what we're talking about here when we talk about defining strategies and priorities.
And also the circle lead can choose in a tactical meeting, if there are many agenda items and there seems to be too little time to process everything, the circle lead may be called upon by one or multiple roles in the circle to prioritize the tensions to be dealt with in that meeting. But it's very rare that that happens. So also there. And I think what I liked a lot about this strategy part, that the circle lead proposes a strategy that goes through integrative decision making. You integrate all the objections to it, so everybody is at least on board, and it functions as a compass. It's a guide. It's not a map with milestones and goals for the next 5 years, but it's a compass in every moment how to best sense and respond to the tasks at hand for your particular role. Right on. So, well, this lovely question that comes up a lot. Well, that sounds really like a manager, right? Like a manager prioritizes people and appoints people to roles in a traditional organization. But no, it's not a manager, because the little slip that Floris made, a manager also holds power and a circle lead holds no power over nobody. But there is certain kinds of authorities that are centralized to this particular role. Why is that? That is to create some of the conditions of self-organization. That is that there is somebody who is keeping a bit of an overview. What's going on? Where are we heading? What are people working on? And is that making the biggest impact on our purpose? Since our purpose is really the boss. It's really the leading energy in the organization to make decisions around. And a manager is a really useful position. It's a very important role in a traditional organization. And what Holacracy did is they didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but they integrated the good points of a manager, which is keeping the overview, helping with priorities, with strategies, and pretty much assisting everybody, right? A good manager actually helps all the people in the organization, is not the one pointing out and giving orders. And that is the responsibility of the circle lead role, to keep the overview, to propose strategies, to energize people to roles, and to do all the work that is not being fulfilled by anybody in this moment. So some other important concepts for the circle lead is that this role delegates and organizes. So it's really about asking for work from the roles that are accountable or finding people to energize those roles. And that is not solving the problems for other people or for roles that are stuck in their work. No, it's about offering those roles what they need through a clear overview, really, that it helps them to make decisions. So the circle lead also doesn't decide anything for anybody. The circle lead decides only within the circle lead authorities to decide those things, and that's it. It's a very equal role without any kind of exception. So that means the circle lead is really at the same level of all of the other roles. There is no top-down hierarchy of power, and not even a top-down hierarchy of authority, because I'll tell you later why that is. I already mentioned, like, it's really about asking and not saying, oh, you are the right person for that role, so you're going to do that work. No, always when somebody is asked to energize a role, that is voluntary. So there's no orders here. And the big difference also with the manager role is really full-time. That's somebody hired to take care of everything. And the circle lead role is a part-time role. And often a circle lead in a holacratic environment has also other responsibilities and accountabilities. usually energizes a multitude of roles. So what is this? Still sounds like there's quite a lot of authority, right, with this circle lead, because if you can define the strategy, you can energize people to roles, and you can even prioritize things in meetings, it sounds like you hold a lot of power. But no, the one magical rule in Holacracy is there is no power abuse. There is no coercion. Nobody is forced or ordered to do anything, and that's what's so liberating. But the role still holds autocratic authorities. And in order to make that not lead to the abuse of power, the authority is distributed over the 4 main roles in any holacratic circle. These are standard roles in any circle, which is a circle lead, a circle rep, a facilitator, and a secretary. And the circle rep will be better explained in the next slides. And the facilitator and secretary role is very well explained in the governance presentation that we did. But basically, each role holds a certain set of accountabilities that they work in a symphony together, and they hold a distributed authority of moving the organization forward from the organizational level, from the perspective of what does the organization need. And that, again, is different than the autonomy that each role has for fulfilling the purpose of that role. This is really towards the purpose of the circle and the greater purpose of the organization. So it's a higher meta level of navigating the organization forward. So this circle rep role only becomes relevant, I would say, once you start your first sub-circle within the general company circle. So as soon as the first sub-circle is born and an organization starts to grow, then a circle rep may be applied. Well, actually, it's really wise to do that. And what is this circle rep? It's an elected role that is used to allow tensions from the sub-circle to be processed in the super circle or any other relevant circle. And that is when the issue seems to extend beyond the sub-circle's current authority. So a sub-circle within a super circle takes care of a smaller part of that super circle, but does not hold authority to take care of other parts in that super circle. But it might be that tensions come up that are relevant for other places where authority is distributed. And then the circle rep, it's like representative, no, for the whole circle's well-being and processes and tensions. And I think the main reason why this circle rep is there is because normally most of these things would go through the circle lead to the super circle, but it could be that the circle lead from its perspective does not prioritize this tension to be processed in the super circle. And then this is kind of like a bypass around the super circle's authority also to go to a higher level of purpose hierarchy. Again, of purpose hierarchy, not of power or authority hierarchy, but it's really that it's a safety bypass for the abuse of power again.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, to clarify. So let's say there are these 3 sub-circles within a larger super circle. That means that from each circle, you could have 2 representatives, so the circle lead and the circle rep, that are representing that group in the super circle. And in that super circle, there will also be tactical meetings and governance meetings. So that also means that the elected circle rep from a sub-circle can make changes to the governance structure of the overall super circle through the governance meetings. So that means that everyone can contribute and make proposals and changes to the overall governance structure, which, well, you can imagine creates a huge shift in power. So there's no more, there's always representatives from like the bottom who are also helping co-create this governance structure.
Indeed, great addition. And it's good to mention this circle rep will attend all of the meetings in the sub-circle, but does not necessarily have to attend all the meetings in the super circle. Whereas the circle lead is expected to attend both of these circle meetings, both of the super and the sub-circle. So the circle rep role can be a very light role, and if the organization is working very well, it's hardly ever used. But it is another safety check, and it is a way to influence the whole through the smaller part. Again, this holarchy of working on the structure.
Yeah, and it also helps, especially for existing organizations. What I've already seen multiple times is that if you have like a traditional hierarchy organization switching to Holacracy, the first thing they do is they take the managers and then make them circle lead, you know. And then I've even heard one organization that immediately got rid of the circle reps, and you know, and so then you have like really the same hierarchical structure. While by implementing this, now someone at the front lines has a say in what used to be like the board, you know, so that shifts the whole power dynamic quite quickly. So it's yeah, quite a powerful addition, even though it's a light role. If it's used, then it's super powerful. Right.
So are you going to take care of this about the autonomy? So the main goal is that every role is free to do what they need to do and that they get what they need. And we kind of describe this as a picture that describes how the interconnectedness works and the autonomy. In a way, what Floris described before is a whole circle is considered a role in its super circle. So the whole circle, a subcircle in a bigger circle, can be considered to have a particular purpose and accountabilities, and that is represented to the super circle by the circle lead. So the circle lead holds the role of the subcircle as a role in its higher circle. I hope that's not too confusing for you, but again, you have to really experience that to see how it works. And this is kind of the flow of purpose and guidance of the higher hierarchy of purpose. So the whole organization holds a purpose, and then we try to split up that purpose in smaller circles and break that purpose up in smaller roles, right? And all of that is guided by purpose. So the main goal for the circle lead is to guarantee the alignment of purpose throughout the organization and throughout its lines of, feeding on information from quote unquote higher levels to lower levels. But again, I want to emphasize these are higher and lower levels of purpose, not of hierarchy, not of power, not of authority. They're just an idea of us how to have some guiding energy, which is our purpose, which is the boss. And the circle lead is kind of the representative of that purpose. So the boss is representative, but the representative is not a human being, it's a purpose. Okay, so that's how that feeds into subcircles. And then, as we already explained, that circle rep can then bypass that whatever the circle lead feels to prioritize or not prioritize in case the tensions are very relevant for the whole organizations to bring them up to a higher level of awareness. I think that's really it.
Yeah, and to add to that, so what you see here is that the circle lead is pointed inward and the circle rep is pointed outward. And there's a reason for that, because the circle lead of a subcircle is determined, so the role filler of the circle lead is determined by the circle lead of the super circle. So that means if you're in a circle and a subcircle is introduced, then it's up to the circle lead of that super circle to determine who will be the role filler of the subcircle. So as you might imagine, there's a risk of power play there, because you know there's like then this flow of people deeper into the organization. So that also means that often, even if it's not intentional, there could be that the circle lead is more prioritizing the needs of the super circle, you know, because they're appointed by the super circle. So there's a line there, right? While the circle rep is really representing the circle itself, moving outwards towards that higher circle. So there's always that balance there. Right, the last link.
This cross link is something not available in Constitution version 5 anymore, but it can still be useful. And in a way, it represents interest and tensions of an external circle or organization. So instead of having a link from a bigger to a nested circle, This is about sister circles. These two circles that are next to each other, part of a bigger circle, as you can see on the image, and they can cross-pollinate. They can represent interest and tensions that are, for example, I don't know, between a marketing circle and a sales circle. They could have really important interest and communications needed. But in general, I think it's been removed because you can just go direct through the source. So it's not really holding any authority. It's more of an information role.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe to visualize it a little bit from this, because what often happens is that certain circles might lay quite far out from your own circle. So let's say, you know, you have a marketing circle, within it a Twitter circle, and the marketing circle is in the sales circle, and the circles in the organization circle, and then there's an IT circle with like sub circles in that, and you would need someone there, you know. And then if there's a lot of information exchange, then instead of going through the circle lead to the other circle, blah blah blah, you can go through the crosslink, and it's a lot easier that way. So
yeah, I already mentioned it, right? If you need anything from another circle, then are you going to go through all the routes? Are you going to ask all these representatives and lead links and cross links and go there? Or, you know, are you just going to go straight through the other person, straight to the role that is represented for that kind of work? So yeah, it's always keep it pragmatic, keep it simple. Don't make this a big thought of how all the information works, and don't try to think this up. Be pragmatic. Whenever you need something in an organization, go directly to the source.
Yeah, and this is such an important mindset shift, because, you know, all these structures, and, you know, I'm very aware that we're talking through quite complex ideas and structures, but in the end, all these structures are just there to make sure that if there's no other way to resolve something, then there's a structure set. That means that it's quite complex and large because you have to contain a lot, but 99.9% of the time, no, you can just go to the role and they will answer, right? You just don't have to go through all these structures. So just start super small, easy, and just go. And then if real things go wrong, or, you know, there's really conflict or something isn't working out, then you have the structure to fall back on. How does it work when you want to create a new circle? So what the most important thing is that it's all, like everything within Holacracy, is tension driven. So let's say, for example, you're a fairly new organization, and you have just one circle, and you start having meetings, you know, and you realize, for example, that a lot of the time is spent on talking about software issues and IT related things, while you are a part of the marketing department. So there's really no point for you to hear all these technical updates. You barely understand what's being said, you know. So there's the tension. That means that's the time to also bring in a proposal in the governance meeting about creating this new sub-circle of IT, for example. Now, this goes through the governance process, as we explained in the governance presentation as well. So it goes through integrative decision making. And now what happens is that the circle lead of the sub-circle is appointed by the circle lead of the super circle, like we mentioned before, right? So super circle lead determines who the circle lead will be of the sub-circle, who will energize that role. Now, then the governance process for that new sub-circle you just created can start. And that always starts with elections. So that means that there are, of course, there are 4 basic roles. We already filled the circle lead role, and now we have the secretary, the facilitator, and the circle rep that need to go through elections to determine who will be the filler of that role. Now, then you're set up. The accountabilities are there. The first 4 roles are there. That means you can go through and start with your own governance and tactical meetings. And then it's done. You have a new circle up and running.
And it's important here to remember yourself that this is not a big plan to then figure out how the whole marketing strategy is going to work. with that subcircle. You just set up the basics, and then you let tensions drive the evolution of that circle. So you don't need to make any big plan. This is a fairly simple and short process. So it's good to emphasize that. It's not how you traditionally would expand the structure of an organization, right? When you set up a new marketing department, there's a huge plan and there's huge resources allocated to making that all defined. Here you don't. You just start a new circle, energize roles, and then let tensions drive the process.
Yes, yeah. And it even could be that certain circles dissolve again. We've had that happen as well, where we notice like the work is getting less and less. We actually kind of fit into that circle as well. Let's dissolve, become a role again in the super circle. And yeah, it's so great to just be able to do that in a simple governance meeting, which we do so regularly. It's really cool.
Yeah, so this is all great, and many people then also ask like, okay, this is all work, but what else? There's other things in an organization that's really important. And for that, there is the concept or the functioning of it's called anchor circle or the integration circle. And this is the biggest circle of the whole organization. This is kind of where it all comes together, because this broadest circle holds the purpose of the whole organization. Means there's no higher, there's no super circle above that anymore. And this anchor circle also holds all the authorities and domains that the organization itself controls. Now, traditionally, you can think of this as like the board or, but this is the circle where multiple things are integrated. And we'll show that in some of the next slides, what that then is. So because it's the highest circle, and for whatever reason, there is no circle lead there. So maybe Floris can elaborate a little bit more why there is no circle lead. But when you start as an organization with the Holacracy Constitution, then you can define an initial structure to integrate other aspects such as investors and finances, but also people-related things that you can all integrate in that circle, because Holacracy doesn't deal with anything else than the coordination of work in the pursuit of a certain purpose. Because obviously we are human beings, right? And we energize roles, but we have needs too. And we need to make contracts with the organization. We have a payroll. There's many different things. Also, we need to grow. We want to educate ourselves, but we might want to give each other peer support. We might want to start guilds. There's all kinds of things around the human relationships in an organization that there is no talk of that in the Holacracy Constitution whatsoever. So that is a certain context, a certain container. And then there is another container, which is the legal context, is how is your organization registered, and you have particular legal obligations to the law. That's a whole different container again. How do you deal with contracts and well, all of the things that are around starting a new organization or running one in a certain jurisdiction. And all these things are integrated together in this anchor circle, or also known as integration circle.
Yeah, so it's a very weird kind of circle, and I think what's important to realize is that within Holacracy, there's not much more defined than this, that it holds the whole purpose, and that the ratifiers of the Holacracy Constitution, so those are usually the founders or the old CEO or the board or whatever, they define the structure upon ratification. Now, what's important is that there's no authority within those circles on the work being done for the purpose. So that's all still with all the roles. So it's not a board, it's not the management team or whatever. It's really the place where all these different contexts that Daan is talking about are integrated together to, feed it back into the organization, really, and kind of create the conditions for Holacracy to be able to express itself. So there's no circle lead there, which is important because that's also very easily then like the CEO kind of type, right? And again, there's no way how Holacracy defines that you should create this anchor circle, but what we've done with other organizations is that all these roles in the anchor circle that hold that are, for example, representative for the people context and the legal context are elected roles. So that's an option. You could even make sure that these elections happen every 6 months or a year or whatever you want. So, well, this visualizes a little.
Yeah, this just is another representation of what we just talked about, where you can see in the right bottom, you can see the work in the red circle. And that is the organizational container where the work for the purpose is being done, self-organized with explicit rules of collaboration, which could be holacracy, which could be sociocracy, which could be any form of rules to coordinate work in the pursuit of purpose. Then if we look in the right top, or the purple circle in the middle, that's really the people context. So that's where the purpose-aligned members, not the roles, but the members and the people engage to grow, develop, and support each other as really a community of independent actors. So it's like an association, right? It's like, it's really a people space, and it's really about the individuals and not about the work that they are fulfilling. And then on the blue circle, you can see the company, which is the principles of self-organization could be translated into legal structures and connected to a DAO, providing on-chain and off-chain governance. You can also have a foundation or a limited company. It can be any form that you choose. And well, there is ways to make that more compatible with self-organization because traditional legal structures are not. And especially when traditional legal structures are being used, it's very important, of course, to integrate the needs of that legal entity towards the law. What do we need to provide? What do we need to do? Which kind of structure does this need to have to comply with legislations? And here you can see there's this bigger circle around these three circles, and that is then the anchor circle, or also known as the integration circle. So yeah, it's like all the work that happens for the people, which is around paychecks, HR, but onboarding, signing contracts, making social agreements, relational agreements, all these things, they happen in the anchor circle, outside of the company circle, the general company circle. And that is the first subcircle of that anchor circle. That's where all the work lives. So that was that red circle that you saw on the previous slide. And that is only really where the work for the purpose happens. So that's really only work, nothing to do with people, nothing to do with the law, nothing to do with aligning with an organization or training or learning or educating yourself. It's really only about how do we perform and execute the work.
Right. So in the other videos, we briefly touched upon the Holacracy Constitution, which is, well, a very important document, as the name suggests, because the Holacracy Constitution is the document that defines the fundamental rules, processes, and other constructs of the Holacracy system for organizational governance and operations. Within an organization running Holacracy, the Constitution is the formal power holder in the organization rather than a specific person like a CEO or a president. So, and what's important to know is that the Constitution is not a complete set of legal bylaws or a formal operating system, nor is it an instruction manual or guidebook for learning how to use the Holacracy system. So what it really is, it's the rule set. It's the rule set that we can fall back on. It's the rule set that defines, you know, all the things that we're talking about, like how do you structure a governance meeting? What authorities does the circle lead have? You know, what happens when you want to create a new circle or a role? What's the definition of a role to begin with? You know, all these kind of things are captured in, like, honestly, a beautiful document. It's almost like written as a legal document. And it's so amazing that it fits almost all organizations just because it captures the process itself and not what it is the organization does.
Yeah, for me, this was also one of those transformational experiences, because I don't have any point of reference that is anywhere close to this with regards to distributing authority. And you say it's the former power holder here. And in a way, it is, because it's holding the power over all the work. But it's like, instead of having a human being as a power holder, we're all signing up for a rule set to distribute the authority. And therefore, there is no more power holder. But for an old kind of mindset shift, and when this is all interlinked, when the role and the soul are completely melted together in the function of a CEO, for example, who holds all authority and holds all the power, this kind of dissolves the power and transports all the authority to this rule set. And for me, that was, again, you can only experience this. It's not something we can explain to you in this slide, or that you will. So if you feel confused, that's very normal. And you will start to feel what it's like to be liberated with other powerful beings that are all leading their own work, and that you can fall back to the comfort. Wow, everything is taken care of, right? It's like nobody's going to abuse me because we have this rule set. And it's like, it's an incredible space to create and to evolve also.
Yeah, and also I think if people are still watching this video series, that means they're definitely geeking out on Holacracy already. So those of you who are actually still listening and watching, I would highly suggest to just dive in and start reading the document, because it's if you can get through it, it's a really fun document as well, because you realize the depth of this method, while also, you know, like, it's super free. You can super easily navigate through it, but really everything is being caught in this set of rules that can apply to any organization. Yeah.
And go work in a holacratic environment. If you're curious to learn, then make that a priority. Become a volunteer somewhere. You can do that for Gaianet. You can do it for a bunch of other organizations. But there's plenty of people that need help who have holacratic environments, and then you can really feel it. That's the best way, through the direct experience.
Exactly, for sure, yeah. So just some conclusions and kind of takeaways. First one being, make sure it's tension driven. And this is definitely a practice as well. You know, we keep training this to really recognize when something is sensed in the now, when it's truly a tension of our role, versus when we just have a good idea, for example. But again, don't make it too complex. You know, be super pragmatic and follow the easiest path to purpose. Just feel the tension and just go. That's always kind of the conclusion. Now, as we said, the rules are a backup in case there is unclarity about the process. So again, take the easy route, just go, just start moving. And, you know, there's always a facilitator there or people around in the process itself that will capture any problems or tension that might arise through your behavior or actions. So know that safety net is always there. That is the reason. And you don't have to understand the complete safety net in order to just go, right? Just have faith in the safety net and start running.
It does help, though, to have an expert beside you. So if any recommendation, don't try this at home with a bunch of people who've never done anything with this before. You can do it, but it's going to take you a couple of years to figure it out. And you can definitely half or even make that 1/4 of your time investment with a really good expert. So it's really worth investing in that in the very beginning of your self-organization journey. Huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then if you start going for a while, you know, first when you begin, you see this like mountain of theory and all these concepts and words that you have to go through and you feel like you have to grasp. But then, of course, like with every game you play, you know, when you start off, you don't understand it. You feel like it's a lot, all these different rules, and you don't quite get it. But the more you play, the more the rules will just fade into the background, and all that is left is that game. Until the rule is broken or until something happens, and then we can always fall back on the rule set.
I consider this to learn to play music, huh? This part. You have to learn the notes, you have to learn the chords, you have to go through it a long time. But at some point, once you get into flow after years of making music, it starts happening by itself. And I'm starting to feel that now more and more with that we are 2.5 years on the road, that we're starting to really jam. And yeah, it's incredible, man. This feeling of creation together with other powerful, autonomous beings. And we're all leading our own work and we're all responsible for filling our own needs. And we have a rule set that keeps it all together. There's a clear playing field, basically. So That is really awesome.
It's so fun to to explore that and to really experience it, because on the one hand it is such a kind of cold and dry set of rules, and then first you go deeper into it yourself and things start to liberating yourself, and then you see that same thing happening to other people that you're working with, and and then that, because those autonomous partners are then together working towards that purpose, like that amplifies each other as well, and it's just it's again about that the rules fading into the background. All the coldness and mechanics of it did completely fade away for me, especially with Gaianet. If we're in flow, and it's just this beautiful trusting in the other partners that they know what they're doing and that they're going towards the same purpose. The freedom that comes out of that in every aspect of your life is it's really beautiful.
But there is a disclaimer here, huh? That I'm not sure if we've actually mentioned that anywhere in our video, so might as well do it in the last one at the closing, that this is not for everybody. And if you are not willing to look inside yourself and to grow and to change, you really have to be willing to transform and to let go of a lot of mindsets and programming of how people work together, then it's not going to work. So if you stick in the resistance and you only want the old world kind of stuff, people telling you what to do, or also you're not willing to look at yourself at why you get triggered, because a lot of people get triggered, right? When they move into this, they feel it's cold, it's not personal, or people are just doing stuff and they're not discussing it with them. There's so many things that come up when people start to practice self-organization in general, that it requires a growth mindset. Basically, that's it. And there's nothing wrong. There's no preference. But for me, from my perspective, to create a new earth, a new paradigm, where there's no more state and no more coercion, that starts from how do we interact together. And many people have really accomplished this in sitting in beautiful circles around the fire, making music together, holding ceremonies together. But very, very few people have cracked the code of how to coordinate work in pursuit of a purpose. And this is it. This is it's the gold standard on the planet. And we've tried many things, read many books, talked with many people. I haven't found anything else that can fulfill that purpose that well as this. And the more we practice it, the better it gets. So yeah, we're not done yet with Gaianet and Holacracy and self-organization.
For sure. Yeah, that's so cool. It's really so cool. And I think you hit the nail right on the head of we have been exploring the depths with people context things, as long as there's no work being coordinated, because then as soon as more these power dynamics start to appear, so much drama and so many parts of people come up that need to be processed. And then if you give people autonomy and that level of self-leadership, all these things are bound to come up. So you both have to have the spaces to deal with that, and also the growth mindset, as you call it, to work through that, because things will come up, and it's truly an intense personal development journey as well.
Indeed. I think that's a great closing for our series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for watching.
For sticking with us.
I hope this is very useful and that you can share this with many people. It's all open source under the Creative Commons, so you can freely distribute this with anybody you want. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Gaianet. If you have amazing projects or you want to become one of these contributors to the New Earth, maybe you already are, then you know where to find us. Gaianet.earth, and we hope to see you in some of these spaces.
Aho.
Aho.